Thank you guys for coming. And thank you for doing the wellness screening. What we're going to do today is go over your Know Your Numbers booklet. So you should all have your results in front of you.
We're going to first start talking about blood pressure, which is going to be about on the second page. When we check somebody's blood pressure, basically what we're looking at is the amount of pressure exerted by the force of the heart as it courses blood through the arteries. That's the top number, called the systolic number. The bottom number is the diastolic number, and the measure of that is basically when the heart is at rest. So the systolic, the top number is always going to be higher because there's more pressure when the heart is beating. So the bottom number should be lower. The standards in your book say that blood pressure at about 120/80 or lower is a pretty good, what we call textbook standard. That's a really good range to be in. The higher your blood pressure goes, the more pressure that we're putting not only on the vessels themselves, but also on the pump, which is the heart. So one of the reasons that we try to keep your blood pressure within normal range is so that we can protect the heart for long term. And then we think about all that pressure that's pushing through the organs, especially the kidneys. So that's the other reason that we really want to get that blood pressure under great control. We do understand that some of you may already know that you have hypertension or high blood pressure, and some of you may not have taken your meds that day because you were fasting. So if your numbers are a little bit higher than they normally run and you didn't take your meds, then make sure that you continue taking them on a daily basis. Otherwise, if it's something that's maybe we found out that you have mild hypertension or it's just starting to creep up on you, this is one of those little warning signs that you might want to talk to your doctor about. Blood pressure is going to change all the time. It's not going to be the same every single day. It's not going to be the same from minute to minute. But we're looking at the overall picture. And if we're starting to creep up and we're starting to see above that 120/80 on a consistent basis, and certainly if it's over 140/90, that's certainly something that you need to be visiting with your doctor about.
Okay, next we're going to talk about body composition, and we actually did several different tests to kind of measure your body composition. Your BMI, that stands for Body Mass Index, and that is just a formula that takes into account your height and your weight. Studies do show that people with a BMI of 19 to 24 live longer and tend to be healthier, and our gold standard is that your BMI is less than 30. However, if you do have a lot of muscle mass, your BMI is going to be in the higher range, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And we'll talk about the body fat percent here in just a second. Your waist measurement, women should be less than 35, men less than 40. And that is something that in the research, they're really starting to promote waist measurements. And the reason for that is the fat that you carry right here around your midsection is much more harmful than fat that you would have other places on your body. So that is something in the future. You may even go to your doctor's office and he might measure your waist, he or she, in the future. Next is the body fat percent. And some of you asked what we were doing when we attached the electrodes to your hand and your foot. And how our machine works, it sends a slight electrical current through your body. Muscle mass is made up mostly of water, which is a very good conductor of electricity. Fat tissue doesn't have very much water in it, so it's not a good conductor of electricity. So that's basically how that unit works. And we believe that knowing of your weight, how much is muscle and how much is fat, gives you a much better picture of where you're at than your BMI. So your body fat percent for men, the ideal would be 13 to 21, and 15% is really, really good for a man. For women, 22 to 28%, somewhere around 25 is a very good body fat percent measurement. And the national averages are much higher than that. So if you are out of range with your waist circumference, your BMI, or your body fat percent. You will meet the gold standard if you can lower that by 2 in a year. So 2% or 2 inches or 2 on the BMI. The next thing we're going to talk about is your cholesterol. Cholesterol is a fatty, waxy-like substance. It is not water soluble, so it needs a carrier to attach to it and take it places throughout the body. So HDL and LDL, those are actually cholesterol carriers. The HDL is good. The HDL will take your cholesterol and help your body excrete it. The higher your HDL number, the better. Your LDL number, that's the bad carrier. What that will do, it'll attach to that cholesterol and it will deposit it where you don't want it, on the insides of your arteries or in your organs. So a high LDL number obviously is bad. So if your numbers are a little bit out of range, if your HDL is too low and you want to raise that, sometimes beefing up your exercise program will help raise your HDL. If you smoke and you quit, usually your HDL will go up. If you add more omega-3 fats to your diet, that can raise your HDL. So more salmon or fish oil, pills. If your LDL level is too high, then changing your diet a little bit, eating less saturated fat, oftentimes can help bring that number down. So we get saturated fat from cheese, bacon, sausage, bologna, hot dogs, pastries. So that's why we're encouraging lean meat and lower fat dairy products, things like that.
The triglycerides are also an important number that we look at, because when we have high triglycerides, that kind of sets us up for problems with potential heart disease and other issues. The triglycerides should be less than 150, and the American Heart Association is now recommending that we get triglycerides below 100. Some sources are even saying that if you've already had some heart problems, that we go lower than that. But our standard right now is to be less than 150. High triglyceride levels indicate possible insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is kind of a catchphrase that we've heard a lot. Metabolic syndrome, syndrome X, those are all kind of the same things, and this is a whole cascade of problems that are happening in the body that could potentially lead to type 2 diabetes and other problems. If I could kind of draw a picture of that person, it would be year after year gaining just a few pounds over a few years' time, and most of that weight is carried in the midsection of the body. The triglyceride levels are starting to go up, the blood sugar is starting to kind of creep up a little bit, not getting above, not getting to the diabetic state yet, but this all sets us up for heart problems and also hypertension along with it. So high triglyceride levels are going to be a potential detriment for all of us. And one of the things that we really want to make sure that we do is to get the triglycerides lower so that we don't have problems with all of these other issues down the road. Things that, first of all, when somebody has high cholesterol and their HDL is too low and the LDL is too high and triglycerides are too high, if you go to your doctor and the doctor says we need to make some changes with lifestyle, that would mean the way you eat and how much you exercise. The total cholesterol, HDL, LDL ratio will take a little time to make some improvement with lifestyle changes, but triglyceride levels will change very quickly, and that's a good thing. If you are eating a lot of big portions when you eat, your triglycerides will be higher. So if you make changes there, you can lower triglycerides. If you smoke and you stop, that lowers triglycerides. If you don't exercise and begin to exercise, it helps lower triglycerides. If you eat a lot of sweets, and boy, last night being Halloween, that can raise your triglyceride levels. So trying to cut back on the sweets will help lower triglycerides. And then the biggest issue for most of us is stress. So if we can get rid of all stress, then our triglycerides would be great, most likely, but that's not going to happen for a lot of us. So we have to figure out positive ways to deal with the stress in order to help that triglyceride level. And it also says that a diet high in sugar can raise the levels, again, eating lots of sweets or large portions at a time. We're also going to talk just a little bit about blood sugars. We look at fasting blood sugar for somebody who does not have diabetes and is not headed toward type 2 diabetes to be less than 100. So we figure that normal blood sugar ranges are generally between 70 and 100 for most people. If your fasting blood sugar is above 100 but below 125, that puts you in what we call that pre-diabetes state. It's the possibility that if things don't change, that you may be headed toward type 2 diabetes. So that's why we really put a lot of emphasis on the blood glucose levels. And we basically diagnose type 2 diabetes with a fasting blood sugar over 125 on 2 separate occasions. That's one way of diagnosing it, and that's why we're looking at the fasting blood sugar levels on these screenings. Other ways of diagnosing type 2 diabetes are a random blood sugar without any regard to when you ate last, over 200 twice, or any one of those, either a fasting over 126 or a random over 200, and another test called a hemoglobin A1C over 6.5. So those are some of the reasons that we look at all of these screening tools, so that we make sure you know where you are, and if there are some problems that we can hopefully make some changes with lifestyle. Some things might take medications in the future in order to get them back under control, but if we can start with lifestyle modification, that's a really good thing.
Did you guys have any questions over any of your numbers?
Or over any of the explanation.
Genetics is involved, so sometimes you can do everything right. You can eat a really healthy diet, you can exercise, and some of your numbers still aren't where they're supposed to be, and that's where we rely on medications. So now that you have your booklet, you can go online on the Healthy Connection website, and you can fill out that online HRA, that health risk assessment. So have this with you when you sit down to do that, so you can plug in your numbers. That'll take about 20 minutes or so to complete that, and then you get a really nice report that kind of summarizes a little bit more in depth your health risk factors or your strengths. So,
any questions, any concerns at all, anything that we can help clarify any more?